welcome back to another episode of Reaching Abundance, the show where we talk about growing your business through podcasting without the fluff, without the hype, and with real, actionable strategies that actually move the needle. Let's be real for a minute. If you've ever searched online for advice on podcasting, you've probably seen all the same hype type headlines. Podcasting is your secret weapon and skyrocket growth through podcasting. Or one I saw recently, beyond the microphone, elevate your authority and influence. That's all great, and I appreciate the excitement around the industry, but I know you're actually looking for the how to be successful, how to structure your episodes, how to batch record, how to make sure your show gets found, and especially how to turn your listeners into clients. If you've ever felt frustrated that all you're getting is a bunch of podcasting is amazing type of content, but not enough detail on the strategy, you're not alone. And that's exactly why we're having this conversation today. I don't need to convince you that podcasting is valuable. You already know that. You're sitting here listening to me because you're wondering how to make sure your podcast actually gets discovered by the right people, the people who could turn into clients for your business. That's what we're diving into today, podcast SEO. If you've ever wondered, how do I show up in search results? Or how do I make sure my podcast reaches the people who actually need me and are looking for me? Well, then you're in the right place. Here's why this is important. According to Edison Research, 74% of podcast listeners say they tune into podcasts to learn something new. That means your ideal clients, people actively looking for financial guidance out there, are searching for the kind of information you'd be sharing. And here's something else to think about. A study by Backlinks found that 49% of podcast listeners discover new podcasts through online search, whether that's Google, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whichever device they're using. So if your podcast isn't optimized to be found using search, you could be missing out on nearly half of your potential audience. That's what these statistics tell us. Here's how we're going to break it down and help you do SEO the right way. First, I'll explain what the heck podcast SEO actually is and why it matters. Then we'll go over the key elements that impact how searchable your podcast is. And by the end of the episode, you'll have a clear, actionable plan for optimizing your podcast to attract the right audience. And of course, whether you're DIYing this or not, this information is going to be helpful. If you are having a podcast production company do your show, awesome. But recognize that it does still fall on you as the host or the creator of the content to take a look at what's being produced and to scrutinize that through the lens of what you know people are searching for and how they might find you. So let's start with what the foundation of podcast SEO is. SEO stands for Search Engine Optimization. A search engine is anything like Google or Bing or YouTube. And optimization means we are getting your content to reflect what people are searching for. It's how content is found online, whether it's a blog, a website, a podcast, any online content. Using SEO strategies is about making sure that when someone searches for a topic, your content appears in those search results, because the words that they typed in are also what's being used for your episode titles, it's mentioned in your show notes, and it's in your transcript. Now, why does this matter? Because SEO is the number one driver of organic traffic online. A study by Bright Edge found that 53% of all website traffic comes from organic search. That's more than paid ads and social media combined. This also supports the murmur from clients, friends, my business besties, and most people that I speak with about business that, social media isn't really driving traffic to business these days, but your SEO probably is. For podcasts, the numbers tell the same story. A report from Demand Sage found that 30% of podcast listeners use Google to find new shows, meaning if your podcast isn't optimized and won't show up in someone's Google search, you're missing a significant portion of potential listeners. So, of course, you're thinking, okay, but how do I optimize my show? What does that even mean? Let's talk about the key elements of every episode. First and foremost, we have episode titles. This is your very first and greatest opportunity for SEO. What we're trying to do in every element is to use words that people would type into a search engine, whether that be Safari, Google, their podcast app, YouTube, wherever they're searching, whatever phrases, words, questions, or even names they're using. It could be specific account type names or a big name in your industry. Anywhere people are typing in these things, you want to be using the applicable words, phrases, questions, and names in your content as well. So, episode titles. This is the first thing potential listeners and search engines see, and it's your first chance to rank for important keywords. If your title isn't clear, your episode is already at a disadvantage. Here are 3 tips on how to optimize your episode titles. 1, use clear, keyword-rich titles. Now, keywords are just simply those phrases that people are typing in. So you're thinking about what would someone search for? What is the phrasing they would use? What is the question they would ask? And that phrase, it could be up to 3 or 4 words even, that is called a keyword. It's really a key phrase. So the first tip here is to use clear, keyword-rich titles for each of your episodes. You're going to avoid catchy phrases or especially jargon-filled phrases like retirement readiness. And instead, you're going to use something like, how much do I need to retire? How much should an entrepreneur have saved to retire? How much should I have in my 401k to retire? Those types of titles are actually questions that people are typing in and looking for answers to. No one types in retirement readiness into Google hoping for search results to tell them if they can retire. They type in specific questions. The second tip here is to keep it under 60 characters. Apple Podcasts and other search results cut off the tail end of longer titles. So while you can have a long title, especially if it absolutely makes sense to do so, recognize that what someone might see on their phone in their search results is only going to be those first 60 characters. So make sure any kind of impactful key phrase, language, account type, or anything specific that represents your episode is pushed up into the first 60 characters of your title. Tip number 3 is to prioritize clarity over creativity. Don't try to be clever. It's annoying. Try to show up in search, which means your title to your episode should be clear as day as to what the heck you talked about. I want you to be straight to the point with your title. Super clear, no questions about what might be contained in the episode. That is how you're going to show up in someone's search results. All right, so why does this matter? All this talk about titles. According to a study by Backlinks, podcasts with keyword-rich titles rank 21.8% higher in search results than those with vague or non-descriptive titles. So, before you hit publish, I need you to ask yourself, if I were my ideal listener, what would I type into the search bar if I wanted to find this episode? That's what your title should reflect. Let's move to level 2 SEO. This is where we're going to really dive into your show notes, which are also your episode descriptions. So on a podcast, it's the section that describes what might be in this episode, or it's the section on YouTube that describes what the video is about. So whether we're talking about podcasts or YouTube, because so many people these days are putting their episodes on YouTube now, but it doesn't matter which platform. you need a rich description. Again, that's clear, that has keyword phrasing in it, and that is indicative of what the heck you talked about in your episode. So here's the thing. Most podcasters write show notes as an afterthought, which is a huge mistake because podcast descriptions and show notes are actually prime real estate for search engines, since Google and podcasts can't actually listen to your episode. They rely on your show notes, second to your title, to determine what this content is about, which also determines who it's shown to. Now, of course, like I said, your show notes are second to the episode titles, which is why we talked about that for 5 minutes first. If your episode title is on point, then the next thing, whether it's Google or a person, the next thing that people are going to look at is your episode description. Here are 3 tips to optimize those episode descriptions so that they're SEO friendly. 1 is to use relevant keywords naturally. So instead of, in this episode, we discuss tax deductions, instead, I want you to write out, learn tax-saving strategies for business owners, including SEP IRAs and Roth conversions. Do you see how much more clear and specific that next sentence is? It's using relevant keywords naturally in a sentence you actually might say. And we deleted the whole phrase of in this episode. That phrase alone is one of the most overused and unhelpful phrases in show notes descriptions across the board. So everywhere possible, try to delete useless phrases like in this episode or in today's interview or this quarter's theme is, anything like that needs to go. Your descriptions should be straight to the point, have minimal extra words, and say straight out, learn tax-saving strategies for business owners, including SEP IRAs and Roth conversions, just sticking with that same example. That is so much more useful, which brings me to the second tip. Make your show notes useful. You should answer key questions that your listeners are thinking about. You should add timestamps for easy navigation and include key takeaways. If someone skims over your episode show notes and gets 0 value, we have a problem. Which brings me to the third tip. Think of your episode show notes like a blog post. The more detailed and useful these show notes are, the more valuable they are for SEO. Most people don't know this, but you can have up to 4,000 characters in Apple Podcasts, for example, to describe what you talked about in your episode. So in the show notes box there, you can have up to 4,000 characters. Most shows don't take advantage of this and are wasting absolutely free and helpful real estate. Most podcasts that I see, and most YouTube videos actually, have like 1 or 2 sentences as a description, maybe a paragraph and a couple of timestamps or bullets if we're lucky, but nowhere near the potential 2,000, 3,000, or 4,000 characters where someone would truly take the time to describe what was in the episode and pull out pieces that would be most useful for a listener, a reader, a viewer. So this matters because a study by Riverside FM, which is my preferred remote recording platform that I always recommend, they found that podcasts with well-optimized show notes get 37% more downloads compared to those with vague or generic descriptions. So 37% more downloads. I think you want 37% more downloads, don't you? I do. So let's make it a point to describe our episodes well. Use most, if not all, of the allowed characters in your descriptions and your show notes so that people can find you, so that they get value when they read your show notes. And so we're not just wasting this free real estate that's available inside your podcast host account. Think of your show notes as SEO fuel for your podcast. A well-written description makes your episode more discoverable and enticing for listeners to hit play. The third tier to SEO is what we'll say is the secret weapon. is your episode transcript. Since Google, Apple, whatever other platform really can't listen to your podcast, it's going to rely on any written text that goes with your podcast, starting with titles, then moving to show notes, then moving to transcripts. And transcripts are one of the most underused yet most powerful SEO tools that you have at your disposal. So within the past few years, I have seen an uptick in the use of transcripts for SEO, much of it in the name of accessibility. But here are 3 tips on how to use transcripts specifically for SEO. For one, your transcript should be posted with your episode on your website. This gives Google more text to index, which makes your episode more searchable. Now, there are some concerns around this as far as aesthetics for your website. No one wants to see a giant block of text just copied and pasted. So the best way I've found to use your transcript is on each episode's webpage. If you have a plugin installed or you have your podcast host connected to your site, it just goes up automatically like a blog post. So on that page, you're going to have your episode title, your podcast embed, maybe an introductory paragraph, hopefully your YouTube video embedded somewhere in there, and then the rest of your show notes. So maybe hopefully that's the 4,000 characters that we talked about earlier. Hopefully it's a well-structured, keyword-infused, really nicely organized description of what's inside the episode with timestamps, bullet points, places where I can find you, follow you, buy your book, all the things. Then below that, I'm suggesting another subheading that would also describe your episode. So maybe like the second best title that you came up with, and then your transcript below that. So the transcript is at the bottom of your post. So it's not any of the first 5 to 10 things someone would see, but it is there. Google can read it, and you hopefully take the time, I'm suggesting that you take the time to go through and space it out and make it look decent. Maybe you can bold each person's name as the conversation goes back and forth throughout the transcript. You go through and hit enter, create paragraphs. There are ways to make a transcript look visually appealing without it just being a massive wall of text, because that is what we don't want. Tip number 2 here, as far as transcripts go, is don't spend your time transcribing the episode yourself. I'm even going to offer that you don't even have your VA do it. Use AI features that are widely available. There's Descript, Riverside, Otter. There's lots of AI websites that create accurate transcripts pretty automatically. If you're speaking technically inside your podcast, there is a chance that you need to go through your transcript and make sure that it picked up the correct words, account types, specific instructions that you were talking about in your episode, because AI does get those things wrong often. The other space where I see lots of issues is toward the end of your episode where someone's mentioning their website or their IG handle, their link for their book, and things like that. So check that out, fix it up, and make sure your transcript looks great. All right, and tip number 3 is to make sure your transcript includes your main keywords. Now, in order for your transcript to include your keywords, you would have needed to, on the front end, before you ever record your podcast, think about the subject matter, the key phrases people are typing in, and the questions that your listeners have about this topic. If you've mapped that out, then when you record, you're automatically going to be infusing that language into your episode, which then will reflect in the transcript. So this does require some pre-planning, maybe a little bit of research online so that you can use something like, Keywords Everywhere or the automatic Google dropdown to discover what those questions are that people are typing in. But this will allow you to speak to them. And then that goes back to just, putting in the time and effort to create good content. So if you're doing that, your transcript is already likely to have these key phrases, your listeners' questions, and your main keywords in it. So that is how you naturally infuse keywords into your transcript. Now, your transcripts matter because check this out. NPR found that podcast episodes with transcripts saw a 23% increase in traffic compared to those episodes with no transcripts. So, NPR is a massive news outlet. They're creating content multiple times a day, all day, every day, podcast blogs, all kinds of content. So if within their realm, they've been able to test podcast episodes with transcripts and podcast episodes without transcripts, and they're able to see that the ones with it get 23% more traffic, I think we should take that as an action item. So if you want more listeners, more traffic, better search rankings, adding transcript is absolutely a no-brainer. Okay, so let's get even more specific. I want to walk you through some advanced SEO strategies for financial professionals. Now that we've covered the fundamentals of podcast SEO, we've talked through titles, show notes, and transcripts, it's time to level up. In this section of the episode, we're talking about advanced strategies that can drive even more listeners to your podcasts and ultimately convert them into clients. There are 3 high-impact strategies that financial professionals can use to grow their podcast audience organically. Again, we're not talking paid ads or any kind of boosting posts or anything like that. Organically is the keywords. We're not talking about splashy, YouTube video ads that play in between other videos or anything like that. Organic keyword SEO ranking is this entire episode topic. So the 3 high impact strategies are 1, a keyword strategy, 2, backlinking and cross promotion, 3, repurposing content for YouTube and social media. So let's go back to 1, the keyword strategy. This is where you consider, like I've touched on this before earlier in this episode, what are your clients searching for? Or what does someone who should be your client search for? SEO is all about matching your content to what people need. The problem, is that many financial professionals create content based on what they think is important, their industry jargon, or like the newsletter that your RIA sent you that day. Using jargon, RIA language, those types of things make it feel inaccessible, scary, and confusing to the general public. For example, your clients are not typing in wealth management insights into Google. They're searching for, how much do I need to retire? Is a Roth IRA worth it if I'm 40 years old? Should I open a Roth IRA for my kid as an entrepreneur? And best tax strategies for business owners making between $250,000 and $500,000. I hope you're able to see the difference between wealth management insights, because that is a very common phrase that I've seen in this financial space, versus those very specific questions that people are actually searching for. Now, according to a study by SEMrush, which is a search engine optimization platform, 92% of all keywords get just 10 searches per month or less. So that doesn't sound like very much. 92% of keywords get less than 10 searches per month. So what this means, though, is that most people are searching for very long, specific phrases, and those are called long tail keywords. So they aren't searching for wealth management. They aren't searching for best money market account. They aren't searching for financial advisor near me. They're searching for a long, very specific question that is unique to their situation. So ditch all the broad terms and start getting ultra specific about your content and the questions that you're answering. Now, here's how to find the right keywords. I touched on this earlier, but there are some really specific action steps on how to search and find keywords that they are actually typing in. So when you type in your topic in the Google search bar and you see your results of that search, there is a section called People Also Ask. And there are, maybe as many as 5 or more additional questions that people are searching for related to your topic that you originally typed in. Those are the questions people are typing into Google. So if there's some way that you could work in those questions and the proper answers, because usually the AI tries to answer it and it doesn't do a good job, that would be a really naturally keyword rich and long tail keyword rich episode. So do that. The second tip I want you to utilize is to check out answerthepublic.com. It's a free tool that reveals the most common questions people ask about a topic. So you can use it in much the same way I just explained. Now, I will warn you, SEO research and, Google and People Also Ask and Answer the Public and all of this, it feels like a rabbit hole because it is. You can get lost for hours searching the best phrasing, the most asked questions, the most detailed questions. Pause, set yourself a timer, do some SEO research, and when your timer dings, stop. At that point, you have done enough to create a great episode. If you've just taken, 15 minutes to gather these topics and the questions that people most ask about your episode topic, you're good. Stop there, move on. Answer those couple of questions, create your episode. Any further information should be the next episode. Okay, the third tip here is to actually look at your competitors' podcast episodes. See if you can find out what topics they're covering and if those topics are ranking well, especially if there is another advisor or money coach or CPA in the space that you admire and maybe they have a larger following than you. Check out what they're covering. Are they covering something differently than you would or more specific than you would? Use these things as clues to help you build out great content for your brand. Now, we're not copying them. We are always going to use them as inspiration and create our own unique content, answering these questions from your own unique perspective for your clients. Here's the action step. Before planning your next episode, take a few minutes, like I said, set a 15-minute desktop timer, type your topic into the search bar, and look at the exact words and phrases people are using. Incorporate that into your episode. The second high impact strategy for financial professionals to grow their audience organically is backlinking and cross promotion. If you have no idea what I just said, that's okay. These two things are ways to ensure that you get more visibility. If you want Google to rank your podcast higher, you basically need other websites to link to your episodes. These are called backlinks, and they're one of the biggest ranking factors in SEO. In other words, you need to get other people, especially larger platforms, to link to your content. A study by Ahrefs found that 91% of web pages get 0 traffic from Google. None whatsoever. And the biggest reason is a lack of backlinks. So if no one else is linking to your content, if no other site is pointing to you, you're basically irrelevant. Google thinks that you don't exist. So here's how to get more backlinks. I've got 3 tips here for you. Number 1, guest posts, quotes, and content for other people's websites. This could be where you write a short article for a finance publication. Maybe you provide quotes to them and content for reporters so that they quote you in their articles and link back to your website. You can create a guest post on someone else's podcast where from that post, they're linking back to you. Anything you can do to help get content on other platforms that includes, Forbes, Yahoo Finance, any of your financial friends who have their own website, fellow people at FinCon, anyone else. to link to you is going to boost you. Now, tip number 2 is to use groups. So there's LinkedIn groups, Facebook groups, Reddit groups, any kind of place where you find community around your topic. Find ways to share your episode content inside there where other professionals in your field are discussing related topics. Now, there's a specific way to do this. Don't just drop a link to your episode every time a new one goes live. That's spammy and no one will click on that. What you need to do instead is pay attention to the conversation. And when a relevant conversation comes up and you happen to have an episode about that, go ahead and provide a thoughtful comment related to the topic being discussed. And then, oh, by the way, I have a podcast episode with all my thoughts on this. And you share that link at that time. You're going to help other financial professionals in the space hear you and see your content, giving you higher relevance. But also, when you post links like that, someone in that group might link to you. So your third tip here is to guest on other people's podcasts. When you appear as a guest, most often they are going to provide links back to your website or your podcast episodes. And so this goes both ways. When you have guests on, you're doing the same thing. You're sharing their links. So at any opportunity, what you want to do is basically a podcast episode swap. They post your episode on their website and link to you. You post an episode on your website, you link to them. So anytime you can provide value on a topic and contribute an article or get listed in a publication or guest on someone's podcast, all of these like outreach type of things can provide links to your website and legitimize your site in the eyes of Google. So advanced SEO strategy number 3 is repurposing content to YouTube and social media. These days, most of us are looking at podcasting as a very video-first opportunity. So repurposing to YouTube feels more like we're actually creating something for YouTube and repurposing it to a podcast. Depending on your workflow as you're creating content, you might have even greater opportunity to repurpose content to other platforms. Now, with all of what we've already said in this episode, SEO isn't just about Google. It's about all the platforms. Apple, Spotify, every podcast app, YouTube, like wherever you're posting has its own algorithm and its own SEO opportunities. Everything we do here is about getting your content in front of more people. So posting to YouTube, posting to social media, creating blogs, all of these things help your episodes and your content rank in multiple places. This matters because YouTube is the second largest search engine in the world. Also, because podcasts with video show a 27% higher engagement rate than podcast episodes without. And YouTube Shorts get twice as much engagement than static posts on any other platform. So here's how to repurpose your podcast for maximum reach. 1, I think you know this, but use short clips for Instagram Reels and TikTok. These are 60 to 90 second highlights from your episodes. You clip them out from your long form recording using Riverside or Opus, or if you have a podcast management team like mine, we hand select and edit portions and edit them down to create an enticing reel. So in most cases, you get however many pieces of short form content with no additional recording time from the host. The other thing I'm seeing most often is that people are posting the full video on YouTube. We're just dual posting at this point when we're creating audio and video at the same time. Audio goes on podcast platforms, video goes on YouTube, and actually Apple and Spotify have video capabilities now too. So at this point, we're just making sure that it gets posted everywhere possible with an SEO-friendly title and description. And the third way that you can repurpose your podcast for maximum reach is to write a blog post based on the content you covered. So whether you are feeding your transcript into some type of AI platform and having it kick out a blog post for your website, or whether you're handing off the transcript to a VA or a copywriter and having them write an SEO-friendly blog for you, there's no wrong answer here. As long as you are utilizing the fact that you sat down and recorded content once, posted it everywhere possible, clipped reels out of it, and then now we're taking it and converting, again, that one-time recording into other written content. This can be blogs, newsletters, other, like Twitter posts, any kind of, I'm really liking the Instagram posts these days that like have the text in the picture. So you're just sitting there like reading. So you did the work once, right? You researched the SEO, you did the 15-minute timer thing, you sat down and record one time, and then you hand it off to a team, hopefully, and they are repurposing it to all of these different places. So when you do this, you're showing Google or any search engine that you're very active on your website, and that in each piece of content, you actually have the opportunity for stronger keywords, even more specific questions. And you're taking advantage of the potential to catch more eyes. Audiences are segmented. Not everyone who listens to your podcast is going to watch the video. Not everyone who watches the video is going to read the blog post. Blog post readers generally are not also podcast listeners. So you're touching different audience segments that don't typically intersect. They're actually very different audience buckets that receive and digest content in their own preferred way. So this is a lot, but don't get overwhelmed right here. Companies like mine do this for our clients all the time. So again, it doesn't require additional work on your part. Or you have AI. I hope you have a VA. If not, go to the prior episode from last week and get you a VA through Camille. There are ways to repurpose your podcast, and it seems like you're everywhere all the time, and reach these very specific audience groups that prefer to consume content a certain way without having to do more work. It really is as easy as it sounds once you get it set up or once you coordinate with someone like me to do it for you. Your action step this week is to pick one repurposing strategy, to try whatever thing you think is going to be most impactful for your business, and make that decision and move forward. If you are DIYing your show and you don't want to learn how to edit video, or you don't have time to edit video, at the very minimum, start by adding your RSS feed from your podcast to your YouTube account so that your full podcast audio is at least on YouTube. That way, you're at least getting some content on that platform. Then double check that your title and your description are optimized with the keywords that we talked about earlier in this episode. It's an easy way to double your reach by adding your content to YouTube with 0 extra recording time, even if you're not recording video yet. Okay, so this episode was absolutely packed with SEO information. SEO is a really deep rabbit hole, and it's really hard to teach it, explain it, or create value for you that's easy to understand and take action on without getting a little bit in the weeds. So we did, and we covered a lot. As we close, let's break it down. I do not want you to try to implement everything at once, even just doing one thing like we talked about. I just want you to pick one way to repurpose. Do 5 minutes of SEO before you start recording on your topic. Any of these little, what seems like baby steps, will actually make a difference in your podcast's discoverability and growth. Here's a quick roadmap to get you started. Step 1, if you can't do anything else, I want you to do this. Optimize your episode titles. If that's all you can do, awesome. Start there. Your next episode gets an amazing title. You're going to use clear, keyword-rich phrases instead of vague or catchy titles. Ask yourself, what would my ideal client type into Google to find this episode? Then, if you have a little more room for improvement, check out your show notes. Make sure that they have keyword-focused descriptions of your episode and that the information contained in your show notes is like a mini blog post. It's useful and helpful and answers common questions related to the topic, because that number one thing you want your show to do is to provide value. And especially for your show notes, we need them to provide value to the reader. So whether that's reader is a human or a search engine, we need value there. If you have space for more, step 3 would be to start using transcripts. Get an AI-generated transcript from one of the sites I mentioned, and then post them at the bottom of your show notes. Most podcast host accounts have a transcript section where you can just add that in when you post your episode. If you are manually posting your episodes on a website, I talked with you earlier about how to format that so it's not overwhelming and it still looks good, but you still get all of the keywords without it just being like this massive copy-paste block of text. Step 4, assuming you have even more capacity to work on SEO. You're going to expand your reach by picking one of the advanced SEO strategies that I talked about, and you're going to try it out this week. Whether that's using Answer the Public for keyword ideas, securing a backlink from another website that can point back to you, or repurposing your podcast into a YouTube video or an Instagram reel. Even small SEO improvements, like if you could only focus on your podcast titles, that can have a giant impact over time. SEO is another one of these long games that we keep talking about on this show. Podcasting is not a short-term, quick fix, blow up, I'm a millionaire tomorrow type of thing. Podcasting is a long-term game. SEO is too. All of these things take time. If you take one thing away from this, let it be this. SEO doesn't have to be complicated. We broke it down into very simple steps. Just do one of them. You don't need to be an SEO expert. You're already an expert at your field of business. You already serve clients well. So just make one small improvement, one episode at a time, or tell your team to do what you learned in this episode and implement that going forward. Now, podcasting is one of the best tools for building authority and attracting clients, but only if people can actually find your show. So by taking one or two of the steps mentioned in this episode, you'll improve your discoverability and make sure your expertise reaches the people who need it most. Now, if you're in the boat where you're thinking like, yeah, this all sounds great, but I'm completely overwhelmed. I have no time to do this. I know I need to work on SEO for my podcast. I know I want to reach more people. That's exactly why I'm here. At Podcast Abundance, we help financial professionals and business owners grow their podcasts through done-for-you services. These done-for-you services include show notes packages where we write SEO-friendly, keyword-optimized descriptions for you. We provide coaching, consulting, growth tactics that are tailored just for your show so that when we implement the strategy, it's to help you turn your podcast into a client attraction system. And then, of course, we offer podcast editing and optimization so that you can just focus on recording, and we handle all of the post-production, editing, repurposing, all of that. If you want expert help optimizing your show and getting more listeners, check out podcastabundance.com or reach out to me on LinkedIn. I would absolutely love to help you grow. Thank you so much for tuning in to Reaching Abundance today. I appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next episode.